They found a way to fight almost any bacterial infection. Antibiotics made this possible.
It's almost impossible and even scary to imagine our lives without antibiotics, because in the past, some infections, like tuberculosis, were considered a death sentence. Where did they originate, and how are a rotten melon and an antibiotic connected? Why do they sometimes stop working? We'll answer these questions in this episode. I'm Sasha Albom, continuing the project I Want to Ask, where we discuss hard-to-believe topics. Your likes and comments boost this video's reach, letting more people see our story. Please subscribe. Thank you. In ancient Egypt, some civilizations would apply moldy bread to wounds and cuts so that the mold would have an antiseptic effect. In India, China, and Russia, onions and garlic were seen as antibiotics, and people ate garlic with almost everything. These methods only sometimes worked, since people didn't know which substance helped or what dose was needed.
Honestly, I don't think this was such a clear and widespread practice. I mean, people didn't really know that if you had, say, a sore on your skin or some kind of infection or gangrene, you should use moldy bread. Most likely there was mold involved along with all sorts of spices, lots of wine and opium. Using moldy bread probably wouldn't create enough antibiotics to help with a serious illness. Antibiotics are substances that are mainly produced by various microorganisms, meaning they are of biological origin, and they have antimicrobial activity, meaning they act against microbes. And usually when we talk about antibiotics, we mean substances that kill bacteria.
On September 3rd, 1928, British microbiologist Alexander Fleming returned from vacation to his lab. Before his vacation, the scientist had been growing Staphylococcus aureus in dozens of petri dishes, which are used for lab experiments. Fleming's small, messy laboratory reflected his untidiness, but this unexpectedly worked in his favor. The scientist examined the dishes for changes and noticed a spot of mold growing alongside the Staphylococcus on one dish. But something else surprised Fleming. The space between the Staphylococcus and the mold, later identified as Penicillium notatum, was clear, suggesting the mold released something that stopped bacterial growth. At first, the scientists called this substance mold juice, but later it was given a name, penicillin, after the very mold, Penicillium notatum.
This is called the zone of clearing, meaning the mold released something into the nutrient medium that killed the bacteria around it. He realized something was being released from the penicillium, likely penicillin. Still, microbiologists aren't biochemists. Microbiologists mainly deal with growing and testing the activity of various substances that have been released, but to actually isolate them, you need other specialists. That's exactly why, even a decade after he made his discovery, no one claimed it because they didn't know what to do with it. It wasn't his specialty, was it? Biochemists handled that. They isolated, tested, concentrated, and mass-produced it.
In 1939, war broke out in Europe. Pharmacologist Howard Florey, biochemist Ernst Chain, and assistant Norman Heatley secured Rockefeller Foundation funding in New York to continue studying Fleming's discovery at Oxford University. The laboratory literally turned into a factory for producing penicillin. The scientists conducted experiments, tested on animals, and grew mold in bathtubs, milk churns, and tin cans to obtain penicillin in the necessary quantities. In 1940, scientists showed the medicine protected mice from a deadly bacterium, and soon after, human trials began. A 43-year-old local police officer scratched himself on a rose, leading to an infection that affected his eyes, lungs, and face. A penicillin course helped, his condition improved, and all the nation's penicillin was used to treat the officer. After 10 stable days, his condition worsened again without medication. A second course of the medication would probably have helped the man recover, but there was nothing left to give, and the man died. Naturally, seeing the results of penicillin, Florey and Cheney planned to make the drug available to British troops. They understood that many soldiers were dying not from bombs, but from infections caused by minor scratches or wounds. England was being bombed again and again. Because of the constant danger, the scientists took a clever step. They soaked coats with mold, knowing that spores could survive on fabric for a long time. That way, if any of the scientists were captured or had to flee, they would always have the substance with them, which meant they could recreate the medicine. In 1941, Florey decided to seek help from the United States, since the United States had not yet entered the war, and pharmaceutical companies there were not as overloaded as in England. Everything changed when the United States entered the war. Thousands of Americans were dying. Penicillin shifted from a scientific interest for local pharmaceutical companies to a medical necessity. The Americans identified exactly which mold Fleming had and which one the British scientists had, but there wasn't enough of these cultures for mass production. The search continued. The scientists hired a woman named Mary Hunt, who went to the market every day looking for different kinds of moldy vegetables and fruits. In Peoria, where the experiments occurred, she was nicknamed Moldy Mary. And then one day, the woman brought a melon covered in mold to the laboratory, and it was this melon that changed everything. It was based on this mold that the technology for mass production of penicillin was developed. Throughout 1943, the production of penicillin was the number 2 priority. The top priority was the attempt to produce a nuclear bomb. They began growing mold in large tanks with electric stirrers and circulated air through them. At the end of 1942, there was enough American penicillin for fewer than 100 patients. But in 1943, 21 billion doses were produced, and by 1945, 6.8 trillion doses. A new era began.
We realized that we could treat bacterial infections effectively, that there are drugs, they exist in nature, that can be found. You can find one, or you can discover them. It turns out they are different, they can be isolated, they can be concentrated, and they can be introduced into the human bloodstream. A new milestone marked a new phase in microbiology and applied medicine for antimicrobial agents. They found a way to fight almost any bacterial infection. Antibiotics made this possible.
In 1945, Fleming, Chain and Florey were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for the discovery of penicillin and its healing effects on various infectious diseases. Penicillin and other antibiotics that appeared in the first post-war decades revolutionized medicine. Most pathogenic bacteria were defeated. But as always, there is an important but.
Even Fleming noticed bacteria were becoming resistant to penicillin. Even then, he warned, "My friends, be careful. Now, we see bacteria resistant to nearly all antibiotics. It's called multi-resistance, meaning multi-resistance, multiple resistance. This is a major modern issue. We use antibiotics everywhere without control. As more antibiotics enter the environment, the chance of resistant bacteria emerging and their populations growing increases. And the further we go into this world of antibiotic overuse, the more we realize that there must be strict control over these antibiotics, that they should be taken only by prescription, in strictly defined dosages, and most importantly, that people use them correctly. Taking antibiotics for less time than prescribed, like 2 days instead of 10, can create resistant bacteria. If something happens and you find you can manage without antibiotics, then avoid using them. Because if you use it uncontrollably, you're not only putting yourself at risk, you're putting your whole family at risk. So once again, for example, our family has a common microbial background, roughly speaking. We constantly exchange bacteria, because we hug, kiss, and so on. We eat from the same dishes. If you happen to develop antibiotic-resistant bacteria inside your body, there's a high chance you'll transfer those bacteria to your spouse, children, or parents. Suddenly, something serious could happen to your loved ones. These bacteria may have shared their resistance genes with them, and you were the one who grew them in your body. These will be very unpleasant questions to ask yourself. It's a very powerful weapon, and every time you use it, you reduce its effectiveness a little bit for yourself and your loved ones. So how do you go on living? Well, how? As always, you have to live consciously.
We hope you enjoyed it and found it interesting. Let us know in the comments what you would like to ask. See you soon.